Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. And today I want to talk about knives that are just good, useful cutting tools, right? Sometimes you don't need anything fancy. You don't need titanium or zirconium. You don't need a super steel or an impossible to rust steel. You just need a reliable cutting tool that you can put in your pocket and have a level of confidence that, hey, whatever goes on today, if I need to cut something, I'm going to be able to do so, and I'm going to be able to do it effectively and quickly and reliably. And so what I've got here are knives for people who just want a good cutting tool. And there are really lots more that we could share, but these are the ones that kind of really, that come to the top of my mind, the top of my list for just really good, useful knives. Now, some of them are going to be knives that I think are a little underrated, that maybe don't get as much love as they probably should. Others are going to be really well known and knives that everyone acknowledges. So, by the way, I didn't limit myself in price too much, but I did steer away from the really, really high-end stuff. Like there's no Sebenzas on this list, there's no Hinderers, although I do think those are reliable cutting tools. There's more going on there, right? If you're buying a Sebenza, it's not just because you want a reliable cutting tool. There are other factors coming into play. So let's get some stuff out of the way and start off with number one, a knife that has been around for a long time, that's a modern classic for a reason, and that is the Rat Model 1. This knife, when I first got into knives, was actually a fairly new knife, and a lot of people were talking about it, so I was able to pick one up. And I've had a Rat Model 1 for years and years. The first one I got was, of course, in Apostate steel with the FRN handles. That's the only thing that they had back then. And then at some point along the way, they did these D2 carbon fiber. It's not really nice carbon fiber, but mostly I was buying it for the D2 steel. And I've often thought about putting other scales on this, and sometime I may actually do that. But the thing that stands out about the Rat Model 1 is just its utility. We've got a pretty thin slicey blade here. The D2 steel is moderately good. It's not the greatest thing ever, but it's definitely not bad, and it's a big upgrade from the Apostate these normally come with. We've got a pretty thick but also pretty simple liner lock here. Phenomenal action for what this is, right? This is smooth and fast. Like, it's really, really good. And when you compare this to a lot of other knives at the price point, especially considering this doesn't have bearings, you got to give the Rat Model 1 a lot of credit. And because it's just a simple tool, you can feel really confident in putting some work in with this knife. Now, one thing I've got to comment on here, I don't have a specific lock type that I stuck to in. I think I have a number of different lock types represented, and that's because if you're cutting something, right, any folding knife, it doesn't matter what folding knife it is, you should never be putting negative pressure on this blade. You should always be treating any folding knife as if it's a slip joint and not relying on that lock to keep you safe, because it's a backup feature. It's like a seatbelt. You don't put a seatbelt on and then go and crash into stuff because you're like, oh, I'm wearing a seatbelt, it should be fine. The safety feature of a lock is great, but it's not foolproof, and you can still get yourself in a bad situation. All right, so I wanted to put that out there because there will be some people say, well, if you want a tool, it has to have a certain lock. And I don't think it does, because you could. I don't happen to have any, but you could definitely put slip joints on this list. And there are a few that I think would be completely fine, even though for me, it's not, they're not going to be on this list because they're not my personal favorite. So number one is the Rat Model 1. I'm not going to belabor every one as much as this, but I am going to put a little bit of discussion into each of these. So get ready for a bit of a longer video here. The next one I don't actually have with me, so we'll leave the Rat 1. I'll just close it as a symbol that we're not talking about this right now. But the next one that I think is just a simple, effective cutting tool is the Civivi Shredder. It feels great in hand. It does have bearings, but I don't think that's the worst thing ever. And if you need something that will really, really cut, it's a little fine tipped there. The blade stock could be a little thicker, but that thing slices like a demon, and it gives you great ergonomics and pretty good value and just a lot of cutting power in something that's really easy to get a hold of, has great action, easy to use. Like, there's a lot that I really, really like about the Civivi Shredder. It is in D2 steel. That again, D2 steel I think is fine, and I'm not being too picky about steels here, but I will acknowledge that some people may want to stick only to stainless steels, and D2 really isn't that. But okay, again, if you just want an effective cutting tool, a little bit of, a couple little rust spots on your blade is not the end of the world. So I don't think that should disqualify something from being a useful cutting tool. Next up is going to be a knife that I have often recommended, probably the single most recommended pocket knife that I have and that I regularly, say to people, this is the knife you should pick up. This, of course, is the cold steel American Lawman. In this current version, it's slim, it's light, it has really good ergonomics. The hollow grind on this CTS XHP steel blade cuts really well, and CTS XHP steel is phenomenal. Now these days you won't be getting your Lawman in CTS XHP unless you get it off the secondary market, that is, you buy a used one. Instead you'll be getting S35 VN steel, which is good, okay, but I don't like it quite as much as CTS XHP. XHP has a bit more edge retention. I suppose cold steel could argue that S35 VN is a little bit tougher, and it probably is, and certainly I know they claim anyway that's why they've gone to a flat grind with most of their knives. But this hollow ground CTS XHP blade is phenomenal. It cuts so well. This is a great combination of being small enough that it's super easy to carry, it's fairly lightweight, it has a really effective blade here, and it's a blade that can do a lot. Like, this could actually flex outside of just your average EDC type task. You could skin an animal with this, you could fillet a fish with it because it's super thin behind the edge. Now there's no flex, okay, you'd have to be aware of that, but this is a versatile knife that weighs very little. It's super slim, so it carries like it's not even there. Like, this is just a great all-around cutting tool. It really is. The only complaint that I could possibly think of, I guess the lock is a little stiff for some people, but outside of that, the ergonomics are good, but they're not amazing. And that's because, this is thin, just slabs of G10 here, and so if you compare this to something like the 8010 or something with a contoured handle, it's not going to be quite as comfortable. But boy, the trade-off is you really don't even know you have this with you. Another budget knife here, and there's going to be quite a few budget knives represented on this list. This is the CJRB feldspar. This, of course, is the White Mountain Knives exclusive. Forgot to check before recording this. I really should have done that. I think Justin still has some of these in stock. These are great. The micarta is so nice. It does exactly what micarta is supposed to do and maintains its grippiness even if it's a little damp or you're a little bit sweaty, which makes this really good. It's quite comfortable as well. Now I will say this, you can't quite choke up. This sharpening choil is just a sharpening choil. Flat ground D2 blade here, reasonably thick stock, which means, again, this is a little tougher, a little more reliable than your average EDC. The lock bar is really accessible. The action is phenomenal. Not that, again, action I didn't make a major component here, okay, because if all you want is a tool, it doesn't matter whether or not it drops shut or not, right? That drop shut action, sure, it's a nice addition, but a knife does not need to have that in order to be a good cutting tool. And so you'll see a lot of like lockbacks. You just saw the American Lawman. It's a lockback. It's not really what you'd call drop shutty. But this one happens to be, it's also quite affordable. If you lose it, you're not going to be that concerned. And this one is my favorite version for sure. This is the White Mountain Knives exclusive. If you go over there, pick one up, use my discount code SHARPSTUFF, it will save you 10%. So great knife, big fan of the feldspar, not too expensive, fairly easy to carry, very comfortable in hand, and a really just all-around balanced knife. All right, I've got a few knives here that are very similar, so I want to kind of give all of them an honorable mention. This is a close tie for my very favorite Benchmade. It's also one of the best EDC knives out there. This is the Benchmade Superfreak. Now, the standard Freak in S30V with the rubberized handle is still pretty good, and it would like almost make this list, other than the rubber can be a little tough going in and out of pocket. But in this version with the G10, This is so good. It's comfortable. The action is phenomenal. Again, I know that doesn't matter. The lock is strong. Now this happens to be a great looking knife as well. The colors were inspired by Deadpool, which I think is pretty cool. And you know, M4 steel is wonderful. Now, the only issue with this knife, Benchmade kind of treats us like children in that whenever they do a knife in M4, they have to coat it. They just feel like, you know, the knife buying public is too dumb to know how to care for M4 steel without rusting it into oblivion. You know, I disagree, and I know many of you do as well, but nonetheless, the Benchmade Superfreak is a really, really good option if what you want is a highly reliable, highly effective cutting tool. I think, though, to be fair, this is so close to a couple of other knives that they should get a mention here. And that, of course, is the Benchmade Griptilian, which is very, very close and very, very similar, and the Hogue, the Ritter Hogue, I guess like the RSK MK1 or something like that. That knife is really, really good as well, and they're all very similar. They're quite derivative of one another, and any one of those I think is going to serve you really, really well. Perhaps I would suggest, I don't know if I should say this. In fact, yeah, I'm going to say it anyway, but maybe a slightly unpopular opinion. I would be looking at the Hogue or the Superfreak or the 20CV Griptilian over the standard FRN Griptilian. They don't connect with me. They feel kind of cheap, and that really puts me off. Okay, so Benchmade Superfreak or the Ritter Hogue or the Benchmade Griptilian all kind of go into this same category. All right, next up is a knife that I don't think gets nearly enough credit. This is the Real Steel H6. This is one version of the Real Steel H6. There are a couple of other versions out there. They have two-hand opening models that are legal in different countries where that's a requirement. They have hollow ground models. They have models that have sort of 3D contoured or 3D machined G10. This one is pretty simple. It doesn't have a finger choil here, and some models do, and you guys know how I feel about finger choils. I'm definitely a fan. But this is a really, really great heavy duty option. This is a tank of a knife. It's got a thick liner there, really solid lockup, and the best part about this knife is the 14C28N steel. Really, this is by far my favorite budget steel. I wish that I could like have a magic wand and turn all the 8CR13 and 9CR and all the Chinese alphabet steels and even most of the D2 steel knives. I wish I could just magically turn them all into 14C28N and the world would be a better place. The performance on this steel is really, really good, and these are not expensive, and it's just a great option. It really, if you were to, let me grab a couple of the budget knives we've already looked at. Here's the Rat 1. Here is the feldspar. I don't think I have anything else that's sort of more on the budget end. Of these three knives, I would probably take the H6, like, you know, 9 out of 10 times. It's just a really, really great knife. It's a little bit heavier than these two, and that's the only consideration that might put me off once in a while. But most of the time, I don't really care that much about weight. I'm either wearing like cargo shorts or jeans or 511s, so an extra ounce is not a big deal to me. And these are really good. They're comfortable. The blade is well ground, and that steel, that 14C28N, is such a great steel. So Real Steel H6, absolute win when it comes to just wanting a really good, reliable cutting tool. Let's see here. We're still going. And remember, these are knives that are a little bit on the plain side where they don't need a lot of bells and whistles. This is a new-ish knife. This is the Spartan Aster. So most of us are familiar with Spartan blades. They've got a few different knives. Most of them are USA made. They're higher end. They're pretty expensive, in fact. And someday, by the way, I do fully intend to get my hands on a Spartan Harsey. However, this is not the Harsey. I believe these are made in Taiwan, and this really, really falls into the category that we're dealing with today, a highly effective cutting tool. The blade here is CTSX HP, which is phenomenal. The ergos on this, the ergonomics, this is second to none. This feels so natural and so good in hand that it's just a total win. Hammer grip, saber grip, even sort of a draw cut grip or reverse grip. This is excellent. And so combine a great feeling grip with a really well done blade where it's a high flat grind, fairly thin at the edge, and this is a really good cutting tool. It's not super fast. This is not the most drop shutty knife. It's fast enough, you can see, but when it comes to just a knife that can really do a lot of good cutting work, this is excellent. Really well done. So Spartan Aster, I don't know. I actually have a first impressions video of this, and I don't know whether this is going to post first or the first impressions is going to post first. If you see this one first, then you have to pretend you've never heard of this knife when I do my first impressions. Just erase this part of the video from your memory. Next up, Cold Steel AD10. Now this is one of the more expensive knives. We had a couple more expensive knives that we've looked at. This knife is, again, phenomenal. It's comfortable, it cuts well, it's easy to work the lock, very strong lock, of course. Really well designed blade. One of my, actually this is pretty well my favorite Cold Steel. The Formax would be a close second. The Recon 1 would be in that round up the top 3, but this is a really good, really useful knife, and it feels great in hand. The materials are nice. This is just a total win. Now, yeah, you're paying a little bit more, but this brings a lot to the table. And I will say this, if you were around when this first came out and you picked one of these up for like 140 bucks, you got a spectacular deal. And I have to say, I feel bad a little bit for those of you who are watching this who did not, weren't into knives back then, or just looking at this now going, hey, I wonder if the AD10 is any good. It is exceptionally good. All right, you should definitely have one if you don't. They are really well done. Now, thinking of Cold Steel, we've had a number of Cold Steels on the list. The Code 4 I think we can throw in as an honorable mention, but we have to mention the Recon 1. It's a little big for some taste. It's a little tactical looking for sure, but again, it is so comfortable in hand. The budget is great. These are like $100, and you will. This is such a tough, durable knife. It's so well balanced, right? It cuts well. This is just for the value and what you get. The capability of this knife is off the charts. So this knife has to be here. Yes, I get that it's a little big. The smaller one doesn't get on this list because it's a little too small for heavy cutting tasks. Like if I said, oh, I've got to process wood to get a fire going, and I'm cold, and I would not want the mini Recon because it's just too small and the ergonomics are not nearly as good as this. So this one makes the list over the mini for sure. But I did want to mention it, and again, there's a reason this is a classic. It's just such a well done, practical cutting tool that you couldn't make this video without mentioning it. All right, next knife on the list, the Steel Will Apostate. Now, why does this get on the list and some other tie frame locks do not? Because of the way it's constructed. So very, the external stop pins here, the stop lugs, make this really strong, really reliable. The ergonomics are great. The blade stock is quite thick and robust, and yet it still slices well. So this is a knife that deserves its place on this list for sure. It's not as expensive as some of the knives we've looked at. I think these go for around 160 bucks, and that's giving you a ton of knife for the money. All right, so Steel Will Apostate, that's an easy one. If you just want a really good cutting tool that does what it's supposed to do, this will definitely do the job for you. I know we're getting long, but I'm trying to give you guys enough information that you can, either one know which of these is the best option for you. The Benchmade Crooked River, we're throwing this guy in here as well because, again, it's just meant to work, and it really is a great cutting tool. The ergonomics are fantastic. The blade shape is balanced between toughness and slicing power. The axis lock is really great. Now, I have changed mine, okay? So this scale and the decorative pivot collar as well as the backspacer are all from Rogue Blade Works. And these were only available for a short time, and actually When I saw these, I bought them, not even owning the knife. I had to go and buy a Crooked River to fit the scales. But you can buy these. They're in Benchmade Custom Shop, so if you wanted to do something special, you can do that. It'll cost you, I'm warning you, Benchmade Custom Shop is very expensive, but in the standard version, this is a really good knife, and you can get these for decent prices on the secondary. Should be able to find one for around 200 bucks, and this is a great knife for 200 bucks. It's comfortable, it's big, it's got great cutting performance, great lock, all kinds of things to recommend the Benchmade Crooked River in whatever configuration you happen to find it in. The next knife is a knife I don't have on the list, so let's jump ahead. But before I open this knife up and talk about it, I want to mention the Buck 110 Slim, either the Pro or even, you know, equally compelling, perhaps more compelling, is the budget version in FRN. So the Buck 110, that's not a knife I'm in love with, but the Pro or the Slim that comes, there's one in S30V and micarta, and then there's another one that is in the 440C that Buck always uses with the Boss heat treat. And the cheap one is like under $30, and it's a great knife. Really, really slim in pocket. You wouldn't even know you have it. The 440 steel performs better than almost any other 440 you're going to get a hold of. And if you really need edge retention, then you can go up to the Pro, and I think even they're only 80 bucks. So definitely wanted to throw the Buck 110 Slim in here because that's a knife I really, really appreciate. Now we'll move on to this knife, which is a newish offering from Kaiser. Again, I don't know if this video will post first or the first impressions on this knife will post first, but this is comfortable, it's decent material, it's not crazy expensive, and it's a bit of a departure for Kaiser with that lock back. Really kind of interesting. The big thing about this knife is the ergonomics. This is a wonderful tool. It just feels so natural and so right in your hand, and then with that thin grind, that high flat grind, crown spine, beautiful blade. The blade steel on this is N690 or VG10. N690. So the N690 steel is good. It's not my first pick of blade steel, but this is not an expensive knife. And again, you know, for most of us, that N690 is going to be phenomenal. And the best thing about this is the versatility. So, you know, if you're in the bush, you can get some cutting work done. If you're in the kitchen, whatever you're doing, this is a blade that cuts really, really well and will hold an edge decently long, especially for the price point. Now, thinking of large back locks, let's grab another knife. Now, I've got a special version. Okay, so this is the Spyderco Native Chief. Great knife. This happens to be the carbon fiber S90V version, which is really, really cool, and I'm really glad to own it. But in just the standard version with G10 and S30V, this is a great knife. If you need something big and slicey, you know, if you have large hands, if you do the kind of tasks that require a bit of extra cutting edge, the ergonomics on this are phenomenal. And, you know, in S90V, this will cut all day and not need to be sharpened. Even in S30V, it's a great knife. So again, just a simple, reliable cutting tool. This thing is hard to beat. Now, before we move on from this though, or I guess as we move on from this, I've got another simple, reliable cutting tool, and that is, of course, the Manix 2 Lockback. This is my favorite version of the Manix because it's so comfortable in hand. It's just, this is a really, really great pocket knife. It feels great. It's easy to carry. It's lightweight. Again, just a total win. So, which one of these do I like the best? I have no idea. The ones that I think are maybe, let me finish this off by pointing out some that I don't think probably get enough love, beginning with the Real Steel H6. The Kaiser Slicer did not generate much excitement and still doesn't. The Native Chief is a great knife, and I think the size maybe put some people off, but it is phenomenal. And finally, the steel will Apostate. So out of this list, I think many of these knives are well acknowledged. Everyone's like, yeah, that's a great knife, or it is getting at least some attention. These knives are kind of sleepers. They don't get maybe as much love as some of the other knives that are out there, but they are phenomenal. And if you just want a really good, reliable cutting tool, these will do a great job for you, as well as all of the other knives that I mentioned. You know, any one of them I would easily recommend for someone who said, look, Kevin, I don't want anything fancy. I just want something reliable and capable. And so that's what I've tried to do with this list. I'll thank you for watching. Anything that I forgot that you really think should be here, mention it down in the comments below. And so if you're watching, go check the comments. There might be some other stuff that I didn't think of. Go check out those channel sponsors. This knife came from Southern Edge Knife Works, and I can't promise that they still have any of these in stock, but they do have a lot of great stuff over there. And if you use my discount code, you'll save yourself 15%, which is nothing to sneeze at. So there you go, guys. Thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We will talk to you soon.